Sonic Talk.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sonic Talk, episode 594. Gosh, we're heading towards 600, aren't we? Is 600 a kind of? It doesn't. I don't think 600 is one of those numbers. 500 is a big number. Maybe 750 is a big number. 600 feels like just a bit sort of. It's neither halfway nor three quarters. But it's still a lot number anyway. It's a podcast to do with music technology that has nearly reached episode 600. We're at 594. So please carry on watching. Basically, we cover music technology, we cover synthesizers, software, all sorts of controllers, DJ stuff to a degree, music production, live music production, all the stuff that kind of surrounds that whole ecosystem. And we're very kindly, we have our friends over at iZotope are providing a prize this week. We have switched up to Ozone 9 Advanced, which is their brand new mastering suite. Details on that a little bit later, but we did the first one last week, and I can tell you people are very interested. The numbers are up. Numbers are up. Report just in. So, people, there's a bit more competition, is all I'm saying, if you want to win your copy of Ozone 9, but we'll get on with that a little bit later. Let's say hello to our guests. Our guests are, we're starting on the right-hand side. We have Mr. Dominic Hawken from Snuggle Sounds. Is that the right word?
It is.
He's
Snuggle
made
Sounds this week.
Snuggle Sounds this week. Dominic is a songwriter, certainly, synthesis, producer. You can see that because this is a different view, isn't it? It looks like a different view.
This is the rear view.
The reverse.
This is normally behind me, so I thought a little bit of a change up.
It looks
and there's a
very
cinema
fine.
screen at the back, so there's a couple of classic cinema posters, so it drops down the back. But it's cool, So that's kind of almost like the doorless table. And I stupidly thought, doorless, that sounds like a great idea. Let's change it up. And then I ended up with lots of small kind of weird and wonderful things to make noises. But then that got me into the deluge. So
that's
deluge,
true.
But that's about
so
it,
positive.
Really.
Of course, Dominic also developed an iOS app, which is called Snuggle Sounds, which is a sort of sleep and relaxation. Seems to be going great guns. How is that? Have you charted? Have you charted on the iTunes store yet?
Not charted yet, but it's a free download, so it's slightly harder to reach the top. So it's a free download. You can use it for about a week, and then if you want it, you have to pay. So it falls between the paid and unpaid things, which is one of those challenges. So we'll see about the charge. But it's loads and loads of downloads, lots of people signing up. So it's clearly working. So that's really good. So search the App Store for Snuggle Sounds if you need to get some sleep or relaxation and support me. Fantastic.
Excellent. Well, that's a good plug. Nice to have you with us as well. I'm particularly digging the uniformity of your Bantam patch cords over there.
Oh,
very
someone
fetching
else said
orange.
That.
Yeah, that's a sort of it's a
all
thing.
In stereo. Yeah. I love these. It took ages to make, but they're absolutely wonderful. Mogami and all that kind of stuff. No compromise. And honestly, the amount of life you save by just being able to plug stuff in, it's great. But everything's in stereo. So there's 2x2 kind of Noah patch lead effect going on there.
Oh, nice. I have a theory about patchbays because I have designed a fair few in my time and installed them. I put it to you, Mr. Dominic Hawken, that actually the amount of time it takes to design and construct a patch bay is not directly equivalent to the amount of time it saves you on a daily basis. I think the installation would have to be in situ for perhaps 15 or 20 years before you actually got that.
Could be.
Obviously, depending on how much you work. I don't know, Rich. I'll come to Rich Hilton, who's a man familiar with patchbays, of course, plays with Chic and a studio guy as well. He's that guy. How are you, Rich? What do you think about the patchbay question, the time saving?
I think you got to have a patch bay.
Okay. That's an interesting concept.
And you just make sure it's not your time. Putting it together.
That's the key, obviously.
Pay somebody to do that.
Okay, well, we could work on the equations. I'm sure there's some sort of there's probably somebody somewhere could write a formula that would work out the kind of the optimum amount of patch bay time versus work time versus paying somebody else to do it time.
Yet you'll put together a Eurorack thing. Fully intending to patch between them.
That's true, but that doesn't. You don't have to think about that in advance. They just are there. Then you just kind of go, well, where is the patch for that? It's not always. It's a constant if you've got the module in the rack. Whereas designing the patch bay, you have to work with the concept of what happens when I buy a new effects unit, or if I put 8 more mic ties in, or I get a new desk, or I...
Yes.
That's to be honest, the Mogami patch cables cost so much I can't afford to buy anything else, so it's all cool. They'll just stick as they are. I think it's probably the safest bet.
There is that too. But anyway, enough of this. There's hijinks, but yeah, I'm just curious about that. These kind of things that sometimes they make us think we're saving time, but in fact they're not. It's like shortcuts, isn't it? When you just think, I'm not sticking in the traffic, I'm going to follow this route just because I'm going to keep moving. And actually you probably end up, when it comes down to the energy equation, you're probably not that much better off, if at all, but you feel like you've done something. It's just like being able to do. Anyway, I'm waffling now. So let's go. First thing first, here we are. Oh, or if we're not. Oh, I know what's happened. I've got this drive enclosure, which basically... goes to sleep, and I haven't figured out a way to stop it going to sleep, which is when I play videos, it stops for a bit and then it starts again. So maybe I'll try that again and see if it
Did you put
back.
Dom's software on it?
No, I haven't.
Yes,
hey, good. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Let's see. Is it coming back? No. Oh, that's annoying. Oh, well, whatever. Oh, there he goes. Let's see.
Hello and welcome to a Sonic Loud special.
Let me try and find my mouse.
Tom here from Universal Audio.
What we're looking at
range, which is now
there we go. Apollo X4, which is a new 4-channel I/O desktop unit.
Right next to you, you can grab it.
Oh, this is the new Twins, X Twins.
X, which is same format, same sort of form factor as you'd expect, from the standard Apollo, but with X mic pre's and.
So the Unison mic preamps are the same.
So there we get it. These are the 3 new interfaces from the Apollo range. We've got the desktop, which has 4 channels of Unison mic preamp, 8 I/O, and 6 analog outputs. So it's a bit more kind of useful for recording in the field. The Apollo Twin, a lot of people use, might kind of take a pair of mics. But obviously sometimes you need a bit more than that, and if you don't want to take your full rack system, it's like the thing you can grab and put in the bag, and it looks like a kind of well positioned thing. I know a lot of people use the Apollos, whether it be the racks or the desktop stuff, and because the new X's have new converters and new mic pre's, they say it's got special sauce in it, which they've now applied to the desktop range, essentially. I'm going to come to you, Rich. I don't know. Do you use the Apollo stuff in the studio? I don't know. I lose track of who does and who doesn't. I mean, there's lots of people do.
I have UAD stuff, UAD2 stuff, but I don't have actual Apollo interfaces running at the moment. Those are very nice products. They obviously expand upon products that existed previously in their line, and they upgraded the mic preamps and the connectivity. And I've been looking forward. I went to AES last week expecting to see a glut of Thunderbolt 3 interfaces, because I just happened to be considering getting one.
Right.
And in fact, there was nothing.
Really?
That I hadn't seen before. Literally nothing. Furthermore, companies, UA wasn't there, PreSonus wasn't there. I don't think Motu was there. If they were, I sure didn't see them. It seems to me pretty much everybody is bailing on New York's AES and deciding to go with the AES that's next to NAMM in Anaheim in January, thinking that there is that much more traffic there.
Right. Okay.
Because of NAMM, because they have now put an AES show next to NAMM right there in Anaheim. So it seems like it's affecting the New York show. New York show had a lot of transduction, a lot of microphones, a lot of mic preamps, a lot of, a few big consoles. That was cool. But anyway, back to UA. Really, really nice products that we didn't see at AES. And I've been looking for something like that. And now I'm hoping the floodgates will open and various other people will pony up some Thunderbolt 3 interfaces as well.
Well, this is the other thing about these now. They've moved up the range, so now it is Thunderbolt 3, so you get to use that cable. I would point out, though, because I thought, whoopee, we can use the one we get with the Mac. It's not. You need the one with the little lightning, because this is just a USB-C. It's the same connector, but it's not a Thunderbolt 3 connector. You need the one that's got a little lightning bolt on it, because it's got some active stuff in the in the cable ends. So and there I was thinking, whoopee, because normally we get UAD stuff in for review, and it's like $60 to $100 on cabling or conversion between your Thunderbolt 1 or 2, whatever it may be, and that works across a number of Thunderbolts. So these will use the standardized Thunderbolt 3 connector, which is the same sort of flat connector like this, but it's not this, it's a Thunderbolt version. So they aren't the same is the important thing. So you will need a cable.
You're saying that it comes with a cable that's different from your standard Thunderbolt 3?
No, I'm not saying it comes with a cable. It doesn't come with a cable. But you can't use, like, for instance, if you wanted to use, I'll use the power supply on my Mac, that white cable. You think that was it? No, it's not. You need a specific Thunderbolt 3 cable or any, not just UA stuff, for Thunderbolt 3 stuff. You can't just use a USB-C, which is a USB 3 cable. It's not the same thing, even though the connectors are the same. Because they share the same connectivity.
Got it. Yes,
yeah.
all right, I got it.
Yeah, I'm glad I muddied those waters particularly.
I wanted to, and somebody's asking me why I care about Thunderbolt 3. I'm looking at my brand new iMac right now, which has got an i9 processor and a GABA RAM, and it's got Thunderbolt 3 hanging off the back of it, and I'm having to go through 2 different conversions to get to my current interface, and it works, but it kind of pops really nasty when you shut the computer down, and it's not really designed for this. So I'm curious to see what comes, because it's been here for a while, that thing anyway. So maybe life would be better. Considering.
Well, the other thing that's I don't know, Dom. I don't know whether you an RME guy. I can't remember whether you were RME.
I've got Burl converters, and I looked into it. It was about 3 or 4 years ago, and I looked really closely at their stuff, and it was all I wanted was as great sonic quality as perfect as possible, because there's a lot of old synths and stuff here, and basically as long as I could get it into the computer as if it was going onto tape and it was just lovely sounding, then I can do everything else in the box. And I ended up going with Burl, which was ironically probably one of the more expensive ones, and they've got transformers on the input purely for the quality. So I'm really interested that the input quality on this is improved, because it's probably right on par with what I've ended up with, because it's 2 or 3 years old anyway. And because you miss out on all those lovely effects and stuff that people who've got it are always saying how amazing it is, and it moves all of the processing power off your computer and stuff. So the answer is no, I haven't, but I'm really interested in having a look at this. I also want to try and get something that isn't racked as well, so that I can take it around with me and just plug it into my laptop and stuff. I'm also in the market for a new laptop as well, so it's kind of good timing that something like this comes about. But interesting, as Rich says, that there's not that much else kind of on the market that's coming out and taking the world
TB3.
by
I
storm.
think there's Antelope do TB3, and I think the Steinberg is. I'm not sure if that's Thunderbolt 3. We're looking at that. Gaz has got a review in the pipeline of the Steinberg Thunder high resolution audio interface, which does like 32-bit recording at what. I mean, it's astonishing what it could do. I'm looking forward to kind of hearing the difference with that. But I think the thing, because people often say when UA posts a new thing, it's like, oh man, I've got plenty of juice in my computer, I don't need this. And that's fine, and you do, yes, I totally agree. But the thing that makes them more interesting, and we covered it with Steve Evans, who did a review of the Apollo X for us, and he just said, well, the thing is, I can go to a studio and I can record a drum kit through a rack of Neves or a rack of APIs or whatever with this. This is what makes it different to me, because I can process the audio on input in real time and decide what sound I want. And in many ways, this is the interesting thing. It's almost a regression back to producers who just want to make a decision and go with it. It enables that, but it enables you to choose from all of those things, because a lot of people like to, particularly with DAWs, like to track clean and then think about it afterwards and maybe decide to kind of reamp or whatever it may be, so you keep your options open. And I think the thing about the UA, I mean, you can do both, obviously, but it enables people to just go, yeah, I want the sound of a 3 or 4 mics through a Neve LA2A type of vibe on that drum kit, and it's going to sound great, and so that's the thing. Now, I wonder, Rich, whether you agree with that. I mean, whether this concept of just going with the your gut feel, record it, stop messing around.
No, well, I think that there's a lot of validity to the modeled input path.
Yeah.
In other words, you can do console models and things like that. I understand also taking a direct signal, and even if I'm recording a guitar in a studio through an amplifier, I'm taking something straight off the guitar just in case I want to use it later these days. Because who cares about track count? But you want to have that option to be able to deconstruct what you've constructed the day you recorded it. So I understand both of those theories, but I think that with respect to recording through plugins, the idea is not so much you're going to put reverbs and delays on things, but that you're going to fashion an input path that has some kind of console emulation or uses some kind of emulated compressor that you wouldn't, that you might use on input anyway. Because back in the day when it was tape, I'd usually touch a little compression on certain things on the way in, knowing that I was going to touch it again after it got there, because I always thought that hitting it lightly twice sounded better than hitting it hard once. Now, it's a totally different world now, and that's not always the case anyway. But that was just kind of how I was approaching things at that time. And I could still approach it that way again if I used hardware like this. And other people, by the way, are emulating this. Both Antelope and Apogee are showing native running plugins that run inside their hardware and allow you to do stuff like this. And they're emulating the same kind of stuff that everybody else is emulating, the classic stuff.
Well, that's true. I mean,
it's popular.
I suppose they've got a bit further to go as far as, because UA have been doing it since for such a long time. I suppose they've got, but they might be doing it a different way. So there might be different sounds to the same thing. Sorry, Dom, did you?
No, I was just going to say I wanted to raise that thing about just printing stuff. Whether it's onto a hard drive, onto tape, or whatever. I think I'll start a campaign for committing sounds down, because I'm as guilty as anyone of leaving everything MIDI into plugins or a live synth sitting there because you actually don't want to make that decision that you've committed to it. And then over the last, I've been actually doing a lot of techno stuff over the last 2 or 3 weeks, and it's just, even when you apply this to kind of EDM or to synth-based stuff, when you're not going out recording guitars and you're not going out recording bass, might even be in the box, just committing it to audio and going, right, that is my kick drum. I might compress it a little bit coming back. I might do some more work. But fundamentally, if I push the channel up, I've got it right. So if I push up all these kind of 8 tracks, that is my tune. Rather than just shilly-shallying around for days and days and not actually committing to the final mix. If it's wrong, fair enough, go and put another kick drum and start again from scratch. But honestly, it's been life-changing just going, do you know what? All right, just print that down and you push them all up. I did a remix of, I can't remember if I've told this one before, State of Independence. And we got these 48 track, very early 224 track slaves. And you could just hear everything comped. And I think it's Quincy Jones, isn't it? And you would just push up 2 tracks of backing vocals and everything was beautifully comped. And you could literally just push these faders up and go, do you know what? It's pretty much there. You might want to put a bit of reverb and everything, but everything was just beautiful. And you suddenly think, well, that's okay. You don't start thinking about whether the kick drum's got enough punch to it. It just sounds great together. So I think I'm going to start. There's a photographer called Fro who has I only shoot raw, never put your camera on manual. So I think I'll start a campaign for, commit your audio. I have to come up with a better name, but basically record everything. Don't leave anything else running live and just live with it. I think it's probably the best way to go.
Yeah, I think that could work in some instances, and I see Rich is putting his hand. But then sometimes, when there's deadlines and there are other people involved, like record companies and artists who might change their minds, and all this kind of mercurial behaviour that people have become used to. Then that you have to kind of accommodate that further down the line. It might be your choice, but you're not the only person. I've got the exact opposite, because I remember we got the 16-track multi-track from Casey and the Sunshine Band, Get Down Tonight. And it was literally, I've probably told this story, and you push up all the faders, and it was sort of all there, but it sounded like a mess. I mean, because there was so much spill and so much kind of, the clarity and focus of the final mix was just definitely not there in the multi-track. And I could not, for the life of me, I was thinking, how on earth did anybody make anything out of that? It just, because you've got the piano, the guys just playing the piano with the sustain pedal on, with the drum kit blasting through the back of it, or whatever it was. It was just like, it was a mess. But it was a great vibe. It was a really great vibe. And there's a bit, even at the beginning, I remember this vividly. Because right at the beginning, you can hear the tapes rolling, and you hear all these bangles and jewelry kind of chingling and jangling, and then the backing vocalist. One of the backing vocalists goes, "Hey, is that a real wood floor?" And you just go, "I can picture what's going on here." It's a real sort of there's a real life to it, and it was beautiful. But I'm glad it was a nightmare to mix, because I thought, I'd love to use the piano, but it's like I can't put that in a sort of electronically contrived mix alongside it because it's just got all this other crap coming down it that I don't want to use. But anyway, it's fun. So yes,
Rich was desperate to get in.
Well, wait, that's the old school. That's proper New York school recording, that, Rich, isn't it? Right?
Yeah, it's you know what, you have to stop being creative when you put the microphone in front of the drum. No, you're going to do the best you can at that moment.
Yeah, I know, absolutely.
You're going to do the best you can at that moment, and next week,
absolutely.
You're going to do the best you can.
I've got it. Yeah, I mean, I just remember that one because it was still great, but the mix it required was beyond my capabilities, shall we say, which is not saying much. Okay, right. Well, so the UAD stuff, the big one is, I think it's like $1,800, and it comes with a quad. There's also an X twin, which is twin and quad DSP. This is there's no solo one. If you want a solo, you go to the Arrow, which is just the one channel unison thing. So, but the other thing that they've got, while I remember, is this DSP pairing, which allows you to chain up more than one DSP per input. So you can create quite a complex and larger chain of stuff on a single input, which should you require it. And so I guess that, hey. Anyway, I think that's pretty much covered. Let's have a little word from our friends over at iZotope. Let's do that now. I think we should.
Building on a 17-year legacy in audio mastering, Ozone 9 brings balance to your mix with never-before-seen processing for low-end, real-time instrument separation, and lightning-fast workflows powered by machine learning. Expect lower CPU usage and shorter startup times with Ozone 9 compared to Ozone 8. Experience fluid metering in a fully resizable environment that lets you track the most subtle details of your audio. Use more plugins at once, mix while you master without worrying about slowdowns or dropouts. And immerse yourself in a smooth, modern experience designed to keep you in your creative flow. As you can see, Ozone 9 is the fastest way to get your master off the ground. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to check out our other videos and head to iZotope.com to learn more about mixing and mastering and to download your free trial of Ozone 9.
Indeed you can. And we have a competition this week. We're looking for the hashtag. You can win a copy of Ozone 9 Advanced. That's an advanced one, which you get a lot more metering. You get all sorts of really cool stuff in that. Well worth checking out. I'm looking for the hashtag mix polish as one word and the hashtag Ozone 9 to @Sonicstate and @iZotope Inc. That's a Twitter competition. That's all you need to put in, but you can put other words and other characters. But we're looking for the hashtag mix polish, the hashtag Ozone 9 to @Sonicstate and @iZotope Inc. And then we can search based on that, and that gives us all the entries, and then we pick a random number. And last week's winner was Aviziv, who's @Improsiv on Twitter. Says, love iZotope and Sonicstate, would love to try Ozone on my projects, and this was last week's hashtag. So if you get in touch, you will be we can put Ozone 9 Advanced in your account. That's the word I'm looking for. Anyway, right, let's get on to something else. What else have we got here? So we've done that one. We've done UA. Here we go. World's smallest synthesizer. Now, this in itself is perhaps not terribly thrilling. It's basically a MIDI, a 16-voice polyphonic synthesizer inside
once again about
a MIDI plug.
MIDI.
This is the guy that created the original one, and he's made a new one. I'll roll it on a bit. I mean, I'll tell you what it is about this that made me really fascinated. So he's made a new one. It's called where's it called? It's got a picture of it somewhere. I'll just see if I can find it. There.
Flash synth, I think, isn't it?
Flash synth. There it is. That's what it looks like now. And he's built a small production run. He got in touch. Because I think he built the first one because Mark Tinley replied to this email thread saying, "Oh, this has already been done," and it's like it's the same guy. But I don't. You probably haven't had time. It's a 40-minute video that is him explaining why he's done all these things and all the design choices, and it's really fascinating. I found it really, really interesting. He's a very compelling presenter. I think he's called Tim Alex Jacobs. I think he's like the mad scientist behind it. You could buy this thing. Let me see. I've got it here somewhere. Where was it? Here it is.
It's like 129
euros, 130 euros, a stereo. So, I mean, it doesn't sound the best in the world. I mean, there's no messing about with it, but he's come up with some just really interesting ways to to solve these design issues. So it's got a stereo output, you plug it in, it's powered by MIDI. We've seen that before. I think Ploytech did something similar, but the video itself is worth watching because it's just full of really interesting stuff about the design. I'm going to come to you, Don, because I know that you like to make things. You know, you're a man who turns his hand to this sort of stuff. Did you get a chance to see any of it?
I saw all of it. I was fascinated. It's brilliant. Thank you so much for pointing it out. It is incredible. And he says himself, this is probably his kind of last goodbye to the DIN-based MIDI thing. He can't really take it that much further. But I mean, it's fascinating for a number of reasons. He uses a thing called an SM32, which is a tiny processor, and they've started making these things run on less and less current, less and less power, mainly for the Internet of Things. So they're kind of designed to stick into fridges or plugs or lamps, that kind of stuff, and Wi-Fi in and do something remotely. But there's the MIDI spec. There is a tiny amount of current that goes down one of the wires, but it was never intended to power anything. It was in MIDI's actually optical. So when you plug a MIDI cable in the back of your synth, inside there's a little optical connector that flashes light, and it means that you don't get earth loops and all sorts. So it's really just designed to power that tiny little LED. So to power basically an entire computer off of 10 milliamps and fit it in the plug, and he fits it in by making a circuit board that's basically made on flimsy plastic and rolling it up. And there's biggest thing in there is this capacitor that does the power. But it's just incredible. And I love the enthusiasm. I love the idea that it works. It's an FM synth at 16 voices, and you can upload your own algorithms. He's going to publish, he's thinking of publishing the source code. The only reason he hasn't is because he says it's a little bit of a mess, so it needs tidying up. But all coders are like that. And I think it's brilliant. And when you compare it to the idea of a synth on a USB stick, I mean, that's great. That's cool. You've already got nice power there. You can do all sorts of things on USB sticks these days. But it's so it uses up so much space, as in sort of digital space on a USB thing compared, a MIDI port. I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. The idea of using up an entire MIDI port to power a synth for MIDI, it just seems such a waste because it can do so much more. And MIDI is such a low bandwidth thing. So yeah, absolutely love it. And I really like the guy. Is it Aaron? There's a guy that's backed him anyway, that's actually handling the sales, who seems really into different scales, chromatic scales and pitch tunings and stuff. So they're two kind of absolutely dynamic, kind of geeky musicians, really, who've done this amazing thing, and I love it.
It's great. There's some fantastic comments in the chat room. Sorry, I was just, a synth that can be swallowed can never be stolen. I like that one. And there's this one as well, which was, I haven't got that set up yet. Let me find that. It was in the chat room. Who was it? Scott from Canada said Clagnut synth, which is again an ode to Gaz, I suppose. It doesn't sound the best thing in the world, but it's just it's almost like building something out of matchsticks. It's like impressive. But you can buy this and you can share in his enthusiasm, and I sort of would love to support him. He's only making a small number of them. I think they're €129 and you get them shipped. But it comes with this really clever. He solved all these problems that basically means it can be updated, but it just has. He's built a special lead that also comes with it. That just plugs USB, and then you can through a serial. I don't pretend to remember exactly how he does it. But it's just clever stuff. I know, Rich. You know what I mean? It's just such a neat and nifty. I don't know if you got a chance to see the whole thing, but
I watched a bunch of it.
Yeah, if you get into it, you get into it. If you don't, you don't. It's one of those things.
I did start skipping through about, 15 minutes in or something, but it's fascinating. It's fun. I'd love to see a Christmas tree adorned with a few dozen of them with attendant lights. So whichever one is being triggered at the time. I imagine all kinds of decorative uses for this thing. It's funny because the only things you can access are the things that have MIDI control numbers. But then again, all software has MIDI control numbers for all their parameters. So that's really no different, except you don't have a screen to be able to manipulate those things with. So you have to, you map it to whatever controller you're using. But I was really impressed with the degree to which you could map it. And it sounded okay. And it was fun. And I dug his enthusiasm in a big way.
He sort of seems like a very smart guy who's going to be, who could apply himself to a number of things, and he just seemed like somebody who will no doubt come up with something also that we will see in the future that will be even greater and perhaps more on trend. shall we say.
Bigger and better synth dongles.
Yeah. Massive clagnut. Maybe that's what it could be called. Although so far, Dom, the title that is going to Shilly Shallying around. I like that as a.
Cool.
I think you could get the title this week, which is so we'll have to see how the rest of the show goes. Anyway, you could get hold of that. It's if you just look at the Flash MIDI micro synths, you should be able to find it. I'll stick show link in the show notes, but it's kind of cool. Okay, the number 3. Let's check this out. This is kind of cool. This is an Indiegogo actually. Remember we did something on Skwidge, which was a kind of musical interface for perhaps people with learning difficulties or disabilities who just wanted to be able to have a tactile thing to play. And this is kind of similar thing. And on the face of it, it seems like, oh God, who needs just a one-button thing? But there's actually quite a lot of expression going on. If you check the video, it looks like it actually does either MPE or some sort of polyphonic aftertouch. And you could imagine people putting this in, using it in more creative ways than perhaps it's being displayed. And it's only 30 bucks, I think they go for on the Indiegogo, which is, seems like a very reasonable cost. I thought it would be more than that. And of course, who was that? Was that Bizet or Carmen? That was Carmen, wasn't it? That was which I think was Bizet. Which one was that? Because I did a remix of that very tune, and I can't even remember what it was called. It was I did Filippo Giordano's version of it.
What was the date of the multi-track?
It was massive, absolutely massive, because it had a choir on it. It had a kind of synth orchestra and MIDI orchestra and all this other stuff. So I was going to just go to this. This is the Kickstarter play. I mean, it's got. Where are they? They're only looking for $8,000, and they've got halfway through the month. They're nearly halfway, but it seems the sort of thing that I think Skwidge did pretty well. I don't remember. Do you remember? I don't know if you remember that. It was a multicolored square, which had all sorts of squishy things, and it was being used in sort of educational facilities, and people were learning difficulties, and it looked like a really good, fun thing to play with. It was just a USB thing, and this by the same people.
Yes, I actually watched the video for the thing you're talking about. The thing that kind of looks like a multicolored.
Yeah, that's right.
These kinds of surfaces on each of the flat.
That's right. Yeah.
Surfaces. But anyway. Well, look, if somebody can sell a controller that looks like something you put your foot up on to get your shoes shined, then I don't see why this shouldn't work.
I suppose that's true. Actually, there's something. I mean, it's similar, a similar concept, perhaps, as the Expressive E. Yeah, I know what you mean. That's what is that. I'm assuming that's what you refer to.
I guess I don't even know what it's called, but you know what I'm talking about. That thing that looks you can kind of rock on it and you can touch on it. You can do all that. But ultimately, you could also put your foot up on it and ask somebody to polish your shoes.
You could. It'd probably break, but it's not designed for footwork.
But anyway, in any case, it looks interesting in the fact that it does appear to send MPE because they take pains to show you that it's controlling Equator, which is a Rolly software that does accept MPE, obviously. So,
it looks like fun.
Yeah, it might be. So, I'd like to. I'd have a touch on it.
Yeah, so it's $30.
A press.
I think it's going to be 45 quid. Yeah, 30 quid.
Oh, 30 quid.
Estimated shipping October this month.
$40.
Yeah, $40, which I think that's cheaper than I expected, to be honest. I thought it'd be a little bit more expensive than that, but hey, who knows? I don't know, Dom. This is it's a bit of a flip thing, but I just like the look of it because it's so sort of unusual.
It's cool. I quite like the fact. I mean, it's a button, right? That talks to an iPhone. So
kind of squidgy.
The bit about the MPE, obviously, so it's tactile, it's touch sensitive, and all the rest of it. I mean, I quite their Kickstarter actually says, tell us what you want us to do or what you want it to do, and we'll make it work, which is brilliant because it's like a product. I'm surprised slightly that they've said music is the thing that's going to sell this product. So full marks to them to do it, because you can imagine it going from the obvious one with the big mallet that you hit it and your iPhone goes up to the top and goes ping or something, that is the fairground kind of ring the bell with the mallet game. Or you could have like kind of I don't know, like a gym workout for your wrists or something, or anything that you need a big squidgy button to use. You can use this for. It just so happens that they've applied it to music, so full marks to them.
Yeah, that's good.
But it is a little bit like the PlayStation guitar where you have to just hit it in the same rhythm as the chords. No, I mean, brilliant thing, but I can just see loads of people hacking it and using it for something else. There must be a better use for it than whack-a-mole. But there's going to be something out there.
I think you agree. I mean, I think it could be something that definitely. I think I don't know what connectivity there is on it other than via the phone, whether it's a Bluetooth or a Wi-Fi thing. But yeah, I like the look of it, and I hope it does well, because it's like you say, it's the sort of thing that could be quite useful for something or other. I mean, you figure it out. I mean, you could imagine it being being. I did have a thought of what it was, but I can't remember what it was now. But yeah, if you want to check it out, it's basically, I'm just trying to think, it's on skoogmusic.com is where their other products are, so you can check that, because you can buy the Skoog. I thought it should be called Skwidge, but I thought Skwidge would be better. But maybe Skwidge is something that's less SEO friendly. Perhaps not. Right, what else have we got? Actually, let's just have a quick. Let's just take a break for our friends over at Softube as well. This is, of course, Monument Bass. New virtual instrument. Actually, they sample a lot of sort of bass-heavy synths through some very interesting bass-centric paths. Stereo with some very specific bass processing. So what comes out at the end of it is actually it sits very nicely and occupies that low end of the mix very, very well. So it's well worth checking out for that. Not only that, but it's also got some really interesting aging and sort of noise burst stuff that kind of evolves the sound in a way that makes it sound more sort of vintage and aged. It's got some really unique processing. Thoroughly worth checking out over at softube.com. So, what was the next thing I had on my list? New MIDI I/O, iConnectivity stuff. We were going to do this last week because I know that Yoad's got a massive MIDI sort of routing system in his studio, which is all done over kind of old school connectivity, old ports. Whereas these new MIO, where is it? It's the XM. I'm trying to think. Is there a way to scroll that? Where's it gone? It's the MIDI I/O. Let's see, it might be here. MIDI interfaces probably get me there a bit quicker, wouldn't it? The MIDI I/O XL. Now, what do you get? You get 8 in and 12 out on MIDI ports. You get 10 USB host ports, so you can run external. So I mean, that's kind of interesting. That starts to really open things up. But you also get one RTP MIDI network port. For those of you who perhaps don't know, RTP MIDI is a really useful. It's just MIDI over network. We use it in the studio all over the place. We use it over Wi-Fi, and it's a really, particularly not so much for real-time controls necessarily. I mean, over Wi-Fi this is, but over Ethernet it's really fast. It's like point to point, and you could join a session. But it's really useful. I use it for this, where I'm pressing a button, and the button will then send something to something over there, and something will happen. And in the video system, it's really powerful, and this is kind of the new set. And what amazes me about these is, this is sort of cutting edge MIDI interfaces, but we are still talking about MIDI interfaces. There's still hardware being made that's based around this protocol that's 30 years old that people kind of moan about, saying it's not this and it's not that, but it's amazing, man. I just think hats off to MIDI, and this looks like a really cool. There's also MIO XM, which is a smaller version, has kind of the same stuff but less. The only thing that it doesn't have, which the original iConnectivity stuff did have, was a host port that you could plug an iOS device into. You can only access this over Wi-Fi network once it's plugged into your general network, but I don't know how that will work there, but I don't know, Rich, whether do you have a need for a sort of big comprehensive MIDI networks anymore? I mean, is that something that you struggle with, routing MIDI in your current studio, or is it mainly an audio kind of thing?
Short answer to your question is no, but I do have a very close friend who still laments the death of the Opcode Studio 5, upon which he based a rather elaborate live stage rig for an artist that he works for. And I can imagine him and other people who are bringing road rigs that include MIDI devices being very interested in this product, because I think it really does take their smaller form factor products and expand it into something really, really intelligent and comprehensive. And it just looks like an amazing solution for somebody who does have racks of that kind of stuff still hanging around. I mean, I actually have stuff all around me, but none of it's wired up. And I'm not that much in a hurry to wire it up, except maybe on a one at a time basis, kind of like you were talking about earlier.
I suppose the thing is, I mean, you could plug in, in host mode, you could plug your Rolly Seaboard into it as a host and then route that MIDI through to whatever, anywhere. That's also could be going over a network across the other side of the room to another computer with some MPE stuff in it. It could be, that's the interesting. That this plethora of host connections is quite unusual for a MIDI interface these days, I think.
Does it receive Bluetooth? I didn't notice.
I don't know if it does, actually, but you can.
That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect I can't see anything on the USB door. It's good. Yeah, I can't see that. That, unfortunately.
Maybe it doesn't. But even over a MIDI cable, it would be nice for that. But it would be nice for anybody who has a lot of gazintas and gazoutas that they need to accommodate.
Yeah. I don't know. I just think because iConnectivity is still plugging away at these kind of utility devices. I think their last thing that did really well was the Play 12, which was the playback kind of thing that just took two sets of 12 inputs, and if something dropped, bang, it would just flip over to the other computer for redundancy, which is a difficult thing to achieve for prices approaching what they did. I know, Dominic, we perennially have discussions about MIDI interfaces, and I just saw this one. This
They're not there
just came
constantly.
Yeah, well, in Sonic Talk, I can see people moaning about it. God, MIDI interfaces and audio interfaces.
Audio interfaces and MIDI interfaces in one show. No, what was interesting, it did come up. I think last time I was on, which was a few weeks ago, and what was amazing was that everyone who was here or in the chat room was saying, "Yeah, I use this XYZ that turned out to be like 10 years old or something." So I've got the two uniters here, which must be 20 years old. A couple of other guys were using it, and there was nothing modern, but there's obviously still a demand. I mean, I've got about 24 MIDI in and out ports between the uniters and bits and pieces, and they're all pretty much used. Certainly all the outs are. And there's definitely a demand for something that's actually modern and works with these computers. Most of the old stuff kind of generally works, but I think I said before, like my uniters swap occasionally, so all the keyboards that are mapped onto one just swap with the other and everything breaks, and it's they weren't really designed to be working in this day and age, to be honest. So this, I think, is brilliant. I love the fact that there's a whole bunch of USB ports on it, and I think that whole thing I was saying just earlier about using up an entire USB patch for one keyboard, because so many keyboards now just come with a USB out and you wouldn't even bother with the 5-pin DIN, is just wasteful. So a whole bunch coming out there is just awesome.
Well, just any kind of controller you can plug in, or plug in you could presumably plug in some Expert Sleeper stuff, I think, which would do MIDI, some MIDI control. Well, obviously it's not audio, but it would do MIDI stuff. So yeah, there's loads of possibilities.
Yeah.
I think I think the big one is $500. The little one is $300. So then $500 for something with that much I/O, I think is probably there's 2, 4, 6. 6 on the back, 4 on the front, and there's loads of metering, and then there's 8 in and 12 out, which are MIDI ports, which should give you enough for most systems. And then you got the RTP MIDI, which if you then had another one, you could run another one of those across the room and have that on the network as well. So you end up with this kind of massively configurable MIDI system joining together over just one single Ethernet wire, which is one of the big problems if you do have a computer somewhere in a room and then 2 massive racks of MIDI gear. It's quite hard to get the signal to them. That's one of the problems, and this would solve that. That's definitely a big one. Rich is waving and nodding sagely there. I said something that made sense. I feel proud.
Everything you say makes sense, but that actually related to our lives over at Le Crib at Niall's house. It's a long run from where the keyboard controllers are to the computer, and it's been entertained many different ways over the years. Right now, it's working well on a different iConnect product, but this would do it, and that's cool.
Yeah,
you can do it over Ethernet.
They've got a couple that do it. I mean, this is just a big one. That some of their just their iConnect 4 or whatever, that's got MIDI. You know, I've got one here that I use occasionally for that sort of thing. You just run a cable and it's like, oh yeah, send the session to that. I mean, the only thing I don't like about their stuff, or I haven't used it for a while, to be honest, and I think it's been redesigned, was the control panel interface was really a bit like, oh my God, you know, I don't really know if I'm going to be able to figure this out. All the filtering and the routing is quite, I mean, necessarily so. It's complex because there's a lot of it. Because, I mean, each port can handle 16 channels and each channel can filter God knows how many things. So you end up with quite a heavy duty configurability sort of scenario. And I think most of their stuff, it has flash RAM, so it retains the last setting you put into it, but you can easily load and save settings in and say, be this now. I suppose it would be handy if some of their ones had actual preset loading, you know, built in, so you could just turn a knob and go, okay, load this one, load this one, load this one. Actually, looking at that, it does say,
looks like it does.
It does say back next load, doesn't it, and save. So maybe I need to hush my mouth and stop dissing them.
For any situation, that's good. But for a live situation, especially those things, if you're trying to rig them up, it's not only changing patches, it's changing the whole MIDI configurable, the MIDI settings. So one keyboard can be controlling different things in the rack. So that would be vital. And I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, it's a funky piece of machinery, isn't it? Really, really good. It's good to bring it into the modern age, really.
Yeah,
that
I agree. So yeah, get over to I think they're available now. So I mean, there they are. You can buy them. I was trying to find a video. They haven't. Obviously, there's been no show. Like I say, Presonus weren't at AES. Neither were iConnectivity. iConnectivity. It would have seemed like that might have been a good show for them, because this is the sort of thing that people who are, you know, perhaps upgrading their studios would go, this is just what I need, or that's just what, you know. So anyway, maybe we'll see them soon.
Actually,
I guess. Yeah.
So I was going to say, D2 in the chat room just raised a good thing. It touches on the thing when I was going back to the LEDs and the lights and the opto-isolators in the MIDI cables. They stop ground loops. So even 30 years ago, you don't get a ground loop from MIDI because it ends in a light bulb and a light sensor. Whereas USB, I keep hearing a lot of people with USB ground loop hums coming up. So if this device can kind of cater for that and actually drop some of those loops, which you would expect really if it was a complete USB based MIDI
I wonder
device.
what happens with that if you say, for instance, you've got a USB host, like I don't know, say one of those MIDI controllers that's got CV out as well, like I know the Arturia Keylab Mark II or whatever. And then, so you've got some kind of ground connection between that, and then the audio is going back into the system, and that's connected via USB back to the host computer. I wonder if it has, internal ground fixing or bridging stuff that would.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really control what's plugged into something that's plugged into it, if you see what I mean. So you've got to hub into it with its own problems, but it would be brilliant if they'd actually looked into it properly and at least isolated the ports on that unit. I was surprised, and then I can't remember what bit of kit started doing it here, and the last thing I was thinking of was the USB, and it just turned out to be that. But you've never ever had that issue. It just shows how solid
the BeatStep Pro was the first thing that I got with that, because you're plugging in gate and CV plus USB back to the computer, then also perhaps the output of the synth module back into an audio interface that's also on USB. Yeah. So that, I think that, and they actually brought out a little Y split, didn't they? Which way you put the power in one side and the signal in another. So it did get earth isolated, but it's just one of those something that one always loses. I find in those scenarios. But yeah, who'd have thunk it? USB ground.
Yeah, indeed.
But it is there. Okay, well, there's also there was a brief. I don't know if anyone's. Well, I'll play a little bit of it and we can talk about it. This is one of those lifestyle videos that is actually. Oh, there it is. There's some synthesizer mastering. This is Wavelab 10, which is Steinberg's. Used to be the only game in town in terms of mastering software.
I think mastering is an art. Because
and now,
it's a wonderful
Wavelab
10
adds a whole bunch of new features
and audio
and
technology.
It's out now.
You're taking something that has been created and you're changing that, and if you can add like an extra 2% of quality and goodness onto someone's record, even that tiny bit is just something beautiful.
So master.
Yeah, Wavelab 10. I don't know. I'm guessing maybe you, Dom, might have used Wavelab in the past. I mean, because it used to be the way, that would be your final
long time ago. I did do some work with Steinberg and way back as well. I mean, but not to have been much help in this kind of conversation. I would love to check it out, actually. I mean, I've been an Ozone iZotope user since like version 3. And really, as soon as that came along, I haven't really looked elsewhere. And it is brilliant, but I'm finding I'm using it more as a plug-in style thing, sort of breaking it out rather than sticking it on a mastering bus. Taking the transient thing or whatever and actually applying it as I go along. And I'm spoilt really with using that, so I'd love to check it out. But I other than to say that it looks really interesting and I want to check it, I can't give you any feedback on today's users of Wavelab or how it.
Yeah, it would change. Well, I know because Studio One, Persona Studio One has taken quite a lot of the mastering thunder because it has its own mastering section as well, which I know Gaz uses quite a lot, and he's been a Wavelab user and Steinberg user for a long time. But the Wavelab 10, it allows reference tracks, which you'd imagine it would at a minimum. So they've added those. They've added video playback, so you can also master for video, external hardware effects loops, which is something that's quite important, obviously, for real-time bounces and playlisting and all the ISRC and all of that kind of stuff. But it's a real sort of user. There seems to be, you're a mastering engineer or you're not, and if you master your own stuff, I don't know. Rich, I mean, do you guys master your own stuff, or do you always send it away to have another pair of ears at the other end to do that final sweeten point?
Lately, good, I'm on. Lately, stuff gets sent away. There was a time where some of the mastering got done in-house. I kind of, I don't know how to put this. I think mastering should be something that you hand to somebody other than the guy who did it. I think that's the point.
Right.
Because if you knew what to do, you would have done it the first time. In other words, you give somebody your best effort and you say, here, imagine, you're us and make this better. And then hopefully they do that. And I just think it's the act of giving it to somebody else that makes it valuable.
I think that's a fair point. Yeah.
So that's sort of an aesthetic thing with me. Now, specific to the software, my both love and distaste for Steinberg is now legendary, but I imagine that this is probably a really nice product, and it occurs in a market where there really aren't very many current mastering alternatives other than the tried and true old stuff. I'll bet you I know people who still use Sonic Solutions on some old Macintosh somewhere.
Yeah.
And Apple has stopped doing what they were doing for a while with that. And just in general, as you point out, PreSonus has an avenue for that, and these guys now do. And it's handy to have when you are doing the mastering. It's definitely great to have great mastering software. And this probably would work, but I don't know.
It is an interesting thing. I mean, that piece, even though it was quite sort of abstract, because Katie Taverner has sort of popped up recently. Steinberg have been doing a bunch of stuff with them, and what she says about the mastering process is just really fascinating. And you kind of go, "Oh, I get that kind of perspective," because I remember when we used to do it, it would go to a place, and it all felt a bit like BBC old school, and it's almost a bit scientific because it was a very different environment or different layout to a standard studio, much smaller room, with lovely monitoring and this super high-end equipment, and a rather sort of studious and pensive individual. Excuse me, my phone seems to be going. I'm going to have to. Yeah, that's all right. It's gone.
And yet, that's kind of what.
And that's what you want.
That's kind of what recording studios have become.
Right.
To much extent. I mean, in terms of the control room centric recording studio, where you basically build the best possible audio environment you can, so you can do the largest number of tasks in it. It sort of has come away from the old control room style thing, and the stuff in house looks more like little mini mastering studios to the extent that people can afford them.
Yeah. That's very true. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I don't know, Dom, whether you ever made that. Did you ever go to see Porky's Prime Cuts? Did you ever get Porky to do?
No, I don't think we did. I mean, I've gone to I don't know where they were. I've gone to mastering sessions, and you realise how good those people are when you've compared it to your own version, so get whatever you want, master it, make sure it sounds great, and then get someone with really good ears to do it and just hear the difference. I think a lot of the mastering that goes on, if you're using, say, Ozone or Wavelab or whatever, tends to be something you strap on the two master tracks, hit go, and then put the track down, whereas a real mastering engineer will be looking throughout the track and moving stuff around and cut and boost. It seems to be a one size fits all. That sounds pretty good if you're using plugins. So but I think, it's the same way as people that go in and grade film. I mean, it takes a very unique kind of person to be a mastering engineer or a film grading person, but it's so important. And I totally agree that it should be someone completely unconnected with the mix itself, totally in tune with the style of music that you're doing. So that actually, if you're doing techno, that might be a 14-year-old kid mastering the techno who's out playing, well, maybe not 14, but out clubs all the time, 18, 19-year-old DJ if he knows his stuff. But in general, for radio and for general non-niche mixes, someone that's been at it a long time really, really knows their stuff, and has basically their whole reputation is based on that. It will do a much, much better job than anyone else, and including yourselves.
Yeah. Interesting. I suppose the thing is, it's the ability to have all of these things at our disposal. The kind of and the stuff like even Ozone and other plugin manufacturers are making these kind of mastering process things, which allow you almost to deconstruct the two bus, even more, whereas in fact, it's actually there's more granularity that's being involved in that process, which is kind of putting a bit more responsibility on them. If they were just, if it's just like, well, look, I've got my EQs, I've got my compression, I've got maybe some level changes I might do, to this. Whereas now it's like, well, actually, I'm going to turn all of the bass down, or I'm going to, there's more that you can do than just that, and that's kind of interesting. That responsibility has been almost turned back into. Will we get into the position where we can give someone a stereo master and they can essentially explode it back into the multi-track constituent parts and kind of remix it? It's kind of how far do you go?
True. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, if you put Ozone on, the stereo bus of something you're working on, generally, particularly if you haven't mixed it that well, it'll sound way better. And suddenly you'll go, whoa, hang on a second, that sounds, and the comparison will be so much better. But it doesn't mean that it can't be even better than that. It's great. When you've got the mix to a situation where putting Ozone on with exactly the right same level balance doesn't make that much difference, then you've nailed it about as far as you can take it. But Photoshop has a balance colors button, which just goes, what's the lightest, what's the darkest, let's spread them all out so it's nicely balanced across the whole image. And your image generally looks, unless it's an image of a snow field, looks great, and the equivalent with a little bit more artificial intelligence and thought into it is auto mastering systems or mastering with help. And there is always, I'm not sure how long it will be with the way that artificial intelligence grows, but at the moment there's always room for someone with experience and knowledge and good ears and fabulous monitoring and particularly excellent coffee that will take what you've done and actually make it still sound better. And if it's your killer career making tune, then you want to put as much work into that as possible, because it's a sliding doors moment where those genuine career making songs and tracks that come out and need to be handled very carefully and with a lot of love and attention. But if it's let's just put something out and see what goes on, then Ozone or your own ideas on it will make it sound great. I'm sure Wavelab will as well. But I've seen it. There's some great YouTube vids about it. If you just search mastering in-house versus real mastering versus plug-in mastering, there's some great comparisons. And I don't think I've seen one where the real mastering engineer hasn't come out with something that sounds a lot better than someone's done with a plug-in.
This is interesting to me. Now, I know it's probably going on a little bit longer, but because essentially there are services like Lander and other things which have an onwardly developing AI algorithm that's learning all the time. Would that be better than you can do yourself? What you were saying, Rich, about having a third party pair of ears. Would the same apply for a third party algorithm?
Well, included within the Ozone product, since we seem to like iZotope, and I do, is now their assistant technology, whereby it will listen to what you're feeding it and suggest a solution based on whatever. And you can actually tell it what to base it on. If you use tonal balance control, you can actually use some other record as your frequency balance template. And so what I like about that is this. It suggests things to me that I wouldn't have otherwise thought to do, and sometimes they're cool things to do. And they're not part of my development. They weren't around when I was growing up, and so I don't consider that. So what's cool about it is I learn new ways of approaching these problems that I may or may not choose to use in the heat of the moment, but nevertheless, it's useful. But what I don't think is that laying the frosting from that cake over there on this cake over here is necessarily going to work, or more likely to make it work. I tend to enjoy the process of approaching each thing as itself. And that's just an artistic decision that I make as a person who likes working a certain way. It's not dogma, and I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with doing that. It's just not a way I choose to go about it.
Right. Okay.
So there's your yin and yang from me on that.
No, I think that's a totally fair enough thing. As actually, Shane King in the chat room says, just as an exercise, he tries to find poorly mastered CDs and master them himself, and just sort of try and make them sound better. And just as an exercise, that's actually quite a valid thing, because I mean, I suppose that's the way to learn, because you won't have a creative connection to the music. You're not going to be particularly fond of the reverb on the vocal because that's when you spent ages editing, whatever it may be. You could be more dispassionate about it because you get more of an emotive sense of just the music and go, can I make it sound better? Better is not always louder, but often that's the way we perceive it, because that's where we got to, isn't it? The loudness wars, it's like competition and whatnot. But yeah, fascinating subject. I'm sure we could talk about it for ages, but actually we've reached the point in the show where we should probably say our goodbyes, and I think that's as it should be. Before we go, I just want to say thank you very much to our friends over at iZotope. Well, as we were talking about mastering, let's plug it again. Ozone 9 Advanced, you can win a copy of that, which is, we're looking for the hashtag MixPolish and the hashtag Ozone 9 to @Sonicstate and @iZotope Inc. Incidentally, while I was looking for some phrases on the site, I did notice, I think they've got like a 20% October sale on as well. So, if you don't win, you could probably save a bit just by heading over there anyway. But I digress. Dominic, thank you so much for joining us. Been great as ever. Some really fantastic facts and figures, and I think you got the show title this week, so it's Shilly Shallying. I think I haven't heard that phrase for a long time. But thank you for joining us very much. Yeah. So I encourage people to go and try out the Snuggle Sounds app as you can plug. We should probably change your third for some sort of link, shouldn't we?
To the next big thing. No, that'd be great. No, check out Snuggle Sounds, App Store, iPhones, iPads. Just search for Snuggle Sounds and you'll find it, and it's a free download. And let me know.
Z's or S's?
S's, Snuggle and Sounds.
Good.
So yeah, just and let me know. You got my Twitter thing here. Get in touch. It's only me really. So just shout.
Right, thank you very much, Dom. And also Mr. Rich Hilton there in Connecticut, thank you for joining us as well. And a part of your several weeks of non-travelling, which must be lovely. How are you settling back into the standard life mode?
It's really nice to see autumn in the northeastern United States, which I've missed for a bunch of years now. So I'm generally just glad. I'm glad to be home and can't wait to get back to playing gigs. So it's all good.
Positives all round. Well, chaps, thank you very much for joining us. I shall go to my that's shot so we can wave our goodbyes. That's it for this time. That was Sonic Talk episode 594. We'll see you again next week. See you guys. Bye-bye.